Frank, let's talk about the Western Conference and some objectives. It's our deadline countdown article that's going to drop a little bit later on over at dailyfaceoff.com. But let's start with the big guns, and maybe the natural place to start is the Edmonton Oilers. Their need has been clear since, quite honestly, early in the offseason. Forget early in this season. They need to find a partner for Darnell Nurse, a right shot defenseman. I guess the question is, and hey, with Kane's LTIR space, maybe that ties into this. How big do you think the Oilers are going to swing here?
I would guess if they could get their hands on it, a pretty sizable defenseman in terms of impact. Think if you can, like, take the bat off your shoulder and do it, something like a Matthias Ekholm sized impact. Now, that's easy to talk about, a lot harder to execute. Now, the other thing is, we know the Oilers have been really flexible this season, and Brett Kulak has provided some of that flexibility by playing on his offhand side. That in an ideal world, like if you could construct the ideal trade target, that person is a top 4 right shot defenseman that you could plug into your lineup. But it's not a stone cold guarantee that that person that they target is a right shot guy. It could be a left shot guy. I still think that's obviously less than ideal. But the other part of it is, what is the stylistic fit that you're looking for? Because the Oilers are kind of all over the map. They've got the Evan, and that's a good thing. They've got an Evan Bouchard who can run a power play, and they've got a Darnell Nurse who can do a lot of different things. And Brett Kulak is certainly more of one of those stay-at-home guys that somehow finds a way to elevate and provide some offense when it gets to the Stanley Cup playoffs. But when you're thinking about what style defenseman the Oilers need, you'd be better answering that than me. What would it look like?
I've always said Darnell Nurse works best with a puck mover. When you look back at his results, they were never that great the last few years with Cody Ceci, below average. In the playoffs, who did he play best with? Philip Broberg, a guy who could execute a clean first pass. I think they need to be looking for a puck mover. Again, you don't need a power play specialist. You have that in Evan Bouchard, and your second unit basically never plays anyways. It's a puck mover to play with Darnell Nurse, and that's why he's not on your trade targets board. But I was joking with our guest today, John Goins. It's like, man, if Mike Matheson could ever squeeze loose out of Montreal, that's the kind of guy I think they need.
Well, and few would know Mike Matheson better than John Goins.
Exactly. Let's continue along to a couple of the other teams in the Western Conference who have Stanley Cup hopes this year, including the Colorado Avalanche. You have their objective as a middle six center. I guess maybe a similar question to Edmonton. How big are they going to swing, and what does their LTIR pool have in terms of an impact on their trade deadline hopes?
Look, I know that Gabriel Landeskog has been working his way back, and you heard Jared Bednar the other day say that this is the best that he's looked, and they're hoping that he's getting closer to a return. They don't have an end date in mind, and it doesn't look like it's anytime close. The swelling that impacts Gabe Landeskog's knee after he does push it is a big red flag, and I would expect the Colorado Avalanche to have all $7 million of that pool to use. They've got a great case to have him come back in the playoffs if he wants to or is ready. And what's anyone going to say? Oh no, they're milking it. I mean, this guy's been out he's been out since the 2022 Stanley Cup final. So I don't know that anyone would be able to say anything otherwise, even if he were closer. So they have that benefit. And I think they should take full advantage, because I believe this Colorado Avalanche team is so much better than the standings would even indicate or appreciate. Their goaltending has been better with Mackenzie Blackwood. They've got 3 of the best players in the game in Rantanen, McKinnon, and Makar, and they're going to be an absolute force to be reckoned with in the playoffs.
Yeah, to give people some perspective on the Landeskog thing, I mean, we talk about a Jonathan Toews comeback as this improbable thing. Who knows what he's got left in the tank? Jonathan Toews has played in an NHL game 6 months sooner than Gabe Landeskog. Like, we've seen Toews before we've seen Landeskog over the last number of years, which is a crazy thing to wrap your head around. One more contender, and it's a bit of a rinse and repeat question here, Frank, but the Dallas Stars, you have them as looking for an impact right shot defenseman. What else do they have? A guy who's on LTIR and Tyler Seguin. But last year they made the splash for Chris Tanev. Are they looking similar, maybe to spend more, spend less? Where are they at?
Well, they're also, to your point, could have that Tyler Seguin LTIR room. And I think the big thing about Jim Nill and his tenure is that for the most part, he's kept his powder dry. He hasn't necessarily gone after the biggest fish because he hasn't been willing to trade future assets, which is why this Dallas Stars team has been able to continue to roll in top prospects into their system. They've been knocking on the door. They were right there. They entered the Western Conference Final as the favorite against the Oilers last year. Probably should have been with the way that they were getting into it. And look, I think it's really clear when looking at this team's roster, their line combinations, exactly where they could use that bump. If you've got Ilya Lyubushkin, Nils Lundqvist, and Matt Dumba as your three right shot guys, that leaves you a ton of room for improvement. And I think Dumba has really struggled at points in time this year. Lyubushkin plays a very limited certain style. If they could add someone that provides them with a little more juice, particularly at the other end, I think that would be really helpful for their team.
Yeah, that's the big guns there. Let's check down a little bit and talk about a few teams who are all in different spots from the middle on down in the West. And we'll start maybe in Minnesota, a team that, probably does want to go on a run here with Kirill Kaprizov out. The results have flatlined. You have them as looking for a non-rental centerman. Is that a Dylan Cousins little nod, or do you think they're looking for something different?
No, I mean, Dylan Cousins would be a fit, certainly with what they're looking to do. I'm thinking more along the lines of, can you get Brock Nelson and re-sign him? So someone that, even if they are a rental, someone that you think you can keep in the fold and keep at a manageable number. They're going to get tons of cap flexibility starting this summer when those Parise and Suter buyouts drop down significantly. That's a $15 million increase in cap space. They've also got to spend that wisely, and it's going to have to be with some smart selection. So, look, I think they could definitely use, and we've been saying this for years about Minnesota, is increased support down the middle. What that looks like, I don't know that it's prudent right now with this team, and injuries have been a big factor of late this season. I don't know that it's prudent for them to go out and spend huge future assets for someone that might walk in the summer. That's not necessarily the play, but if you are confident that you could re-sign a rental, or if you're going to go after a younger guy that does have control or term, that would be the way to do it because it helps you now and for the future.
The Minnesota Wild do not have a first or a third round pick in the upcoming NHL entry draft. The LA Kings are right in the mix right now, sandwiched between the Edmonton Oilers and the Vegas Golden Knights in the Pacific. Drew Doughty on the return at some point, but you think they could look to add another piece to the blue line?
Yeah, and definitely a left shot guy. Like, I look at their forward group and I say, tell me where the hole is, right? Because they've got a unique mix of forwards. They're really strong down the middle. If you want to throw Kevin Fiala on that top line, you can move things around if you need to. I think there aren't very many holes with this team up front, but I look at their blue line and say they've got the opposite problem of really just about everyone else. When Doughty comes back, you've got Doughty, Clark, Spence on your right side. What does the left side look like for you? Mikey Anderson has been fantastic. I think he's one of the more underrated players in the league. Obviously, you've got Vladislav Gavrikov, but Joel Edmondson at this stage of his career and Jacob Moverar, I think when you look at some of those guys, if you've got Edmondson on your third pair, great. And things will sort itself out a little bit on the blue line. When Doughty comes back, I just think one more additional pump that they could give the left side of their defense would be really important.
And finally, let's go down to the basement and check in on the Nashville Predators, where you say their objective should be to chart a path forward. I guess my question is, does that path forward include any sort of a sell-off in the next 6 to 8 weeks?
It would be smart. Barry Trotz needs to give us an indication of what he wants to do. I think that's what his fan base is looking for too, because the messaging and the actions have been confusing. Go back to November 2023, 13 months, 15 months ago. And what we're talking about is a team that acknowledged they were rebuilding and 3 years away from being a competitor. Well, they go out in the summer after making the playoffs and spend $109 million on Stamkos, Marchessault, and Shea, and now they're 7th in the Central. That's not near good enough. They've got long-term commitments. And I've said this before, and it might be a wild hot take. I think they should consider using one of the extra first-round picks that they have this year to try and get off of one of those tough contracts, send it somewhere else, and be gone, because it's going to be tough to generate flexibility moving forward with some really meaningful assets. And you've got extras as it is. I don't know that this isn't how you intended to use them, but some of the best GMs, I believe, in the NHL find a way to admit to some of their mistakes and fix them.
Nashville projected to have around $13.5 million, assuming a $92.5 million salary cap ceiling if things go their way. So $13.5 million, not a ton of wiggle room next offseason. So that certainly makes a lot of sense.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.